Question 1. Which of the following describes a change in the environment that happens after a behavior occurs and makes that behavior more likely to happen again in the future? A. Punishment. B. Antecedent. C. Reinforcement. D. Stimulus control. Answer: C. Reinforcement. This question defines the fundamental principle of reinforcement in ABA. Reinforcement is any event or stimulus that occurs immediately following a behavior and results in an increase in the future frequency of that behavior. The consequence, what happens after, is key, and the effect is the increase in the behavior's likelihood. It doesn't matter if something was added, positive, or removed, negative. If the behavior increases, it was reinforced. Punishment decreases behavior. Antecedents happen before behavior, and stimulus control is when behavior is cued by the environment. Reinforcement is the process of increasing behavior with a consequence. Question 2. What is the term for a temporary increase in the frequency, intensity, or duration of a previously reinforced behavior when an extinction procedure is first implemented? A. Spontaneous recovery. B. Behavioral contrast. C. Response variability. D. Extinction burst. Answer: D. Extinction burst. This question defines the extinction burst, a common phenomenon observed when you stop reinforcing a behavior that used to receive reinforcement. When behavior no longer gets its usual payoff, the individual might temporarily try harder, leading to a surge in the behavior's frequency, intensity, or how long it lasts. New behaviors might also appear. Response variability is part of the burst. Spontaneous recovery is a temporary return of the behavior later. Behavioral contrast relates to changes across settings. An extinction burst is that initial bump in behavior when you first stop the reinforcement. Question 3. You are conducting a functional behavior assessment, FBA, for a child's screaming behavior. You notice that the screaming happens most often when the child is left alone and stops immediately when an adult comes over to see what's wrong. Based on this pattern, the function of the screaming is most likely: A. To escape a task. B. To get access to a tangible item. C. To gain attention. D. Automatic reinforcement. Answer: C. To gain attention. This scenario points to attention as the likely function of the screaming. The antecedent is being left alone. The consequence is an adult coming over. Social interaction/attention. Since the screaming happens when attention is low and consistently gets attention, and it stops once attention is provided, the data suggests the behavior is maintained by gaining attention from others. Escape is getting away from something. Tangible access is getting an item. Automatic reinforcement is self-produced. This pattern strongly indicates the behavior is occurring to get social attention. Question 4. When defining a behavior for a behavior plan, it is essential that the definition includes: A. The probable function of the behavior. B. What the behavior looks like in observable terms. C. The type of reinforcement schedule to be used. D. The individual's feelings or intentions. Answer: B. What the behavior looks like in observable terms. This question asks about a crucial component of a good behavior definition. An operational definition must describe the topography, what the behavior physically looks or sounds like, in terms that are observable by others. This ensures that anyone collecting data or implementing the plan can agree on whether or not the behavior occurred. While function, reinforcement schedules, and intervention details are vital parts of the plan, they are not part of the definition of the behavior itself. Feelings and intentions are internal and not directly observable. Define what you see or hear. Question 5. Which type of data collection involves recording whether a behavior occurred at any point during a specific interval? A. Whole interval recording. B. Momentary time sampling. C. Partial interval recording. D. Duration recording. Answer: C. Partial interval recording. This question asks about a specific time sampling measurement method, In partial interval recording, you divide the observation time into intervals and mark if the behavior occurred at any point within that interval, even if it was very brief. This method tends to overestimate the actual occurrence of the behavior. Whole interval requires the behavior throughout the entire interval. Momentary time sampling records if it occurs exactly at the end of the interval. Duration records how long it lasts. Partial means in any part of the interval. Question 6. A stimulus that signals the unavailability of reinforcement for a specific behavior is called an A. Discriminative stimulus, SD. B. Motivating operation, MO. C. Conditioned reinforcer. D. S delta, SD. Answer: D. S delta, SD. This question defines an S delta, SD. An S delta is an environmental stimulus that has been associated with the absence of reinforcement for a specific behavior. It signals that performing the behavior now will likely not result in the usual payoff. For example, a sign that says closed, SD, signals that trying to open the door and go inside will not be reinforced. An SD signals reinforcement is available. Most change motivation. Conditioned reinforcers are learned rewards. The S delta is the reinforcement not available here signal. Question 7. What is the process of providing reinforcement for behaviors that are successively closer to the desired target behavior? A. Chaining. B. Prompting. C. Fading. D. Shaping. Answer: D. Shaping. This question defines shaping. Shaping is a teaching procedure used to teach new behaviors that the learner doesn't currently perform. It involves reinforcing responses that are gradually more like the desired final behavior. You reinforce closer and closer approximations, withholding reinforcement for earlier forms. This molds or shapes the behavior over time. Chaining teaches a sequence of steps. Prompting provides help. Fading removes prompts. Shaping is about reinforcing successive approximations. Question 8. When a previously reinforced behavior is no longer followed by reinforcement and its frequency decreases in the future, this process is called A. Punishment. B. Negative reinforcement. C. Extinction. D. Satiation. Answer: C. Extinction. This question defines extinction. Extinction happens when you stop providing the reinforcement that was previously maintaining a behavior, and as a result, the behavior becomes less likely to occur in the future. It's about breaking the link between the behavior and its consequence. Punishment decreases behavior by adding / removing a stimulus. Negative reinforcement increases behavior by removing a stimulus. Satiation is reduced reinforcer effectiveness due to overexposure. Extinction is stopping the payoff for the behavior. Question 9. What type of behavior is controlled by rules or instructions rather than by direct experience with consequences? A. Contingency-shaped behavior. B. Respondent behavior. C. Automatic behavior. D. Rule-governed behavior. Answer: D. Rule-governed behavior. This question defines rule-governed behavior. This type of behavior occurs because an individual follows a rule or instruction, which is a verbal description of a contingency. If you do X, Y happens. The behavior is controlled by the rule, not the immediate consequence of performing the behavior. Contingency-shaped behavior is learned through direct trial and error experience with consequences. Respondent behavior is involuntary. Automatic behavior is self-reinforced. Rule-governed behavior is following directions. Question 10. You are measuring how many times a student completes a math problem correctly. The best direct measurement method for this would be A. Duration. B. Latency. C. Frequency/count. D. Momentary time sampling. Answer: C. Frequency/count. This question asks for the most appropriate direct measurement method for a specific countable behavior. Completing a math problem is a discrete event with a clear beginning and end. Counting how many times it happens is frequency. Duration would be how long it takes to complete one problem, or the total time spent working. Latency is time to start after the instruction. Momentary time sampling would estimate occurrence in intervals. For a simple count of completed items, frequency, or count, is the most direct and accurate method. Question 11. What is the dimension of behavior that refers to the time from the presentation? Question 11. What is the dimension of behavior that refers to the time from the presentation of a stimulus example, sit down, to the start of the behavior example beginning to sit? A. Duration. B. Latency. C. Frequency. D. Interresponse time. IRT. Answer B. Latency. This question asks about the measurement dimension called latency. Latency is the time elapsed between the presentation of an antecedent stimulus, like an instruction, and the beginning of the individual's response. It's the reaction time, or the time it takes for the person to initiate the behavior after receiving the cue. Duration is how long the behavior lasts. Frequency is how many times it happens. IRT is the time between two instances of the behavior. Latency is the time to start after the cue. Question 12. A stimulus that increases the current effectiveness of a reinforcer and increases the frequency of behavior that has been reinforced by that stimulus is called a N. A. S delta, SD. B. Abolishing operation, AO. C. Establishing operation, EO. D. Discriminative stimulus, STI. Answer C. Establishing operation, EO. This question defines an establishing operation, EO, a type of motivating operation, MO. An EO increases the current reinforcing effectiveness of a stimulus, makes it more desirable, and also makes behaviors that have historically led to that reinforcer more likely to occur. For example, being deprived of water for a long time, deprivation, acts as an EO that makes water very reinforcing and makes you more likely to seek out and drink water. An AO is the opposite, decreasing effectiveness. SD's signal availability, S delta's signal unavailability. EOs increase motivation and relevant behaviors. Question 13. Which verbal behavior operant is controlled by a motivating operation, MO, and is reinforced by receiving the specific item or service requested? A. Tact. B. Echoic. C. Intraverbal. D. Mand. Answer D. Mand. This question defines the mand, a key verbal operant in Skinner's analysis. A mand is a request, demand, or command. It is controlled by a motivating operation, like being hungry or thirsty, and the consequence that reinforces it is getting the specific thing that was requested. Saying water please when you are thirsty is a mand reinforced by getting water. A tact is controlled by a nonverbal stimulus. An echoic is repetition. An intraverbal is a response to a verbal stimulus without point-to-point correspondence. Mands are all about requesting needs/wants. Question 14. When teaching a multi-step skill using a task analysis, you teach the steps in order from beginning to end, reinforcing the successful completion of the first mastered step, then the first two mastered steps, and so on. This is called A. Backward chaining. B. Total task presentation. C. Shaping. D. Forward chaining. Answer D. Forward chaining. This question describes the forward chaining procedure. In forward chaining, you break a complex skill into steps using a task analysis. You teach the steps in their natural order, starting with the first step. You reinforce the learner for independently completing the first step. Once mastered, you teach the first and second steps, reinforcing upon completion of the second step, and continue adding steps from the beginning of the chain. Backward chaining starts from the last step. Total task attempts all steps at once. Shaping teaches a single behavior form. Forward chaining builds the chain from the front. Question 15. A procedure where a practitioner physically prevents a problem behavior from occurring is called A. Extinction. B. Timeout. C. Response blocking. D. Response cost. Answer: C. Response blocking. This question defines response blocking. Response blocking is an intervention procedure where the implementer physically intervenes to stop the problem behavior from happening as it starts or is about to occur. For example, guiding a hand away from the face to prevent self-injury. Extinction is withholding reinforcement. Timeout removes access to reinforcement. Response cost removes a reinforcer the person already has. Response blocking is the physical interruption of the behavior. Question 16. The ability of a behavior to occur in the presence of stimuli that are similar to the original training stimulus, even though it was not taught with those stimuli, is called A. Stimulus discrimination. B. Response generalization. C. Stimulus control. D. Stimulus generalization. Answer: D. Stimulus generalization. This question defines stimulus generalization. Stimulus generalization happens when a behavior that was learned and reinforced in the presence of a specific stimulus, the SD, occurs in the presence of different, but similar, stimuli. The stimulus changes, but the behavior remains the same. Learning to say car for one picture of a car, and then saying car for other car pictures, toy cars, or real cars, is stimulus generalization. Stimulus discrimination is responding differently. Stimulus control is when behavior is reliably cued. Question 17. What is the ethical principle that requires behavior analysts to protect the privacy of their clients? A. Beneficence. B. Integrity. C. Confidentiality. D. Justice. Answer: C. Confidentiality. This question asks about the ethical principle of confidentiality. Confidentiality means protecting the privacy of all client information, including their identity, case details, data, and records. Behavior analysts have an ethical duty to ensure client information is kept private and is only shared with appropriate consent or when legally required, example, mandated reporting. Beneficence is doing good. Integrity is honesty. Justice is fairness. Confidentiality is specifically about protecting private information. Question 18. When collecting data, what does it mean for your measurement to be reliable? A. It accurately reflects the true value of the behavior. B. It is consistent across repeated measurements. C. It is easy for observers to implement. D. It measures the function of the behavior. Answer: B. Is consistent across repeated measurements. This question defines reliability in measurement. Reliability is the consistency of your data collection. If you measure the same behavior multiple times under similar conditions and get similar results, your measurement is reliable. It means the measure is dependable and not just random. Accuracy, reflecting the true value, is validity. A. Ease of implementation. C. Is practical but not the definition of reliability. Measuring function. D. Is the purpose of an FBA. Reliability is consistency. Question 19. Which schedule of reinforcement is most resistant to extinction? A. Fixed ratio, FR. B. Variable ratio, VR. C. Fixed interval, FI. D. Continuous reinforcement, CRF. Answer: B. Variable ratio, VR. This question asks which reinforcement schedule builds the most persistence in behavior, making it hardest to extinguish. Variable ratio, VR, schedules where reinforcement is delivered after a varying, unpredictable number of responses, produce high, steady rates, and are most resistant to extinction. Because the learner is used to not knowing exactly when the next reinforcement is coming, they continue responding for a long time even after reinforcement is completely stopped. CRF is the least resistant to extinction. Fixed schedules are less resistant than variable ones. Question 20. What is the purpose of conducting a functional behavior assessment, FBA? A. To teach new skills. B. To determine the antecedents and consequences that maintain a behavior. C. To eliminate all challenging behaviors. D. To select punishment procedures. Answer B. To determine the antecedents and consequences that maintain a behavior. This question asks about the purpose of an FBA, focusing on what information it aims to gather. An FBA is a process used to understand why a behavior occurs. It identifies the environmental events, antecedents, and consequences that are related to the behavior and likely maintaining it, its function. While an FBA informs teaching skills or selecting procedures, its direct purpose is to analyze the environmental factors controlling the behavior. It's about understanding the relationship between behavior and environment. Question 21. A consequence that, when removed following a behavior, makes that behavior more likely to happen in the future is called A. Positive reinforcement. B. Negative reinforcement. C. Positive punishment. D. Negative punishment. Answer B. Negative reinforcement. This question defines negative reinforcement. The key is when removed following a behavior, something is taken away, hence negative, and makes that behavior more likely, hence reinforcement. Negative reinforcement involves removing an unpleasant stimulus right after a behavior, which increases the future frequency of that behavior because it successfully removed the aversive thing. Taking aspirin to remove a headache, behavior increases. Putting on a seatbelt to stop the beeping, behavior increases. Taking something bad away to make the behavior happen more is negative reinforcement. Question 22. When teaching a skill using a task analysis, prompting the learner through all steps except the last one, and reinforcing independent completion of the last step is called A. Forward chaining. B. Total task presentation. C. Backward chaining. D. Shaping. Answer C. Backward chaining. This question describes the backward chaining procedure. Using a task analysis, steps for a skill, you teach the chain by starting from the end. You prompt the learner through all the initial steps, but reinforce them for performing the last step independently. Once the last step is mastered, you teach the second to last step and the last step, reinforcing completion, and so on, adding steps from the end of the chain towards the beginning. Forward chaining starts from the first step. Total task attempts all steps. Shaping teaches a single behavior form. Backward chaining reinforces completion from the end. Question 23. Which ethical principle requires behavior analysts to only provide services within their area of training and experience? A. Beneficence. B. Integrity. C. Scope of competence. D. Responsible conduct. Answer C. Scope of competence. This question asks about the ethical principle of scope of competence. Behavior analysts must recognize the limits of their expertise and only provide services, teach, or conduct research in areas where they have the necessary education, training, and supervised experience. It's about ensuring they are qualified for the specific work they do to protect clients. Beneficence is doing good. Integrity is honesty. Responsible conduct is a broader principle. Scope of competence is specifically about working within your qualified areas. Question 24. A behavior analyst accepts gifts of substantial value from a client's family. This is a potential violation of which ethical principle? A. Confidentiality. B. Professional boundaries/dual relationships. C. Integrity. D. Beneficence. Answer B. Professional boundaries/dual relationships. This question addresses the ethical issue of accepting gifts from clients, which relates to maintaining professional boundaries and avoiding dual relationships. Accepting gifts of substantial value can blur the lines of the professional relationship, create a perceived obligation, compromise objectivity, or lead to exploitation. Ethical guidelines advise against accepting significant gifts to maintain clear professional boundaries. Confidentiality protects information. Integrity is honesty. Beneficence is doing good. Accepting significant gifts violates professional boundaries. Question 25. When data points on a line graph are widely scattered around the trend line, this indicates A. High reliability. B. Low variability. C. High variability. D. An effective intervention. Answer: C. High variability. This question asks you to interpret the visual appearance of data on a graph, specifically referring to variability. Variability is how much the data points jump around or are spread out from the average, mean, or trend line. When points are widely scattered, the data has high variability, indicating inconsistency in the behavior's occurrence or measurement. Low variability means points are clustered closely. Reliability is consistency, which high variability suggests is low. An effective intervention usually shows a clear change in level or trend, not just high variability. Scattered points mean high variability. Question 26. What type of consequence involves the removal of a stimulus immediately following a behavior, which results in a decrease in the future frequency of that behavior? A. Positive reinforcement. B. Negative reinforcement. C. Positive punishment. D. Negative punishment. Answer: D. Negative punishment. This question defines negative punishment. The key clues are removal of a stimulus, something taken away, negative, and results in a decrease in the future frequency. Punishment. Negative punishment decreases behavior by taking away something the person likes or has access to contingent on the behavior. Taking away a toy for misbehavior is negative punishment if the misbehavior decreases. Taking away something good to make the behavior happen less is negative punishment. Question 27. Which measurement procedure involves measuring the time from the end of one instance of a behavior to the beginning of the next instance of the same behavior? A. Duration. B. Latency. C. Frequency. D. Interresponse time. IRT. Answer: D. Interresponse time. IRT. This question asks about interresponse time. IRT. IRT measures the time elapsed between two consecutive occurrences of the same behavior. You measure from when one behavior finishes to when the next one starts. Duration measures how long a single behavior lasts. Latency measures time from a stimulus to the behavior starting. Frequency is the count. IRT is the time between responses. Question 28. What is the main ethical principle that requires behavior analysts to base their practice on scientific evidence and data? A. Integrity. B. Beneficence. C. Responsible conduct. D. Justice. Answer: C. Responsible conduct. This question asks about the ethical basis for using evidence-based practice. Responsible conduct, or sometimes included under integrity or professionalism, depending on the code, requires behavior analysts to maintain high professional standards, which includes basing their practice on scientific knowledge and using evidence-based procedures. They must use data to make decisions and evaluate the effectiveness of interventions. Integrity is honesty. Beneficence is doing good. Justice is fairness. Basing practice on science is a core aspect of responsible conduct. Question 29. A graph shows a client's behavior data. A phase change line is drawn vertically on the graph. What does this line represent? A. A period of missing data. B. The start of a new day or session. C. A change in the intervention or experimental condition. D. A change in the observer collecting data. Answer: C. A change in the intervention or experimental condition. This question asks about interpreting a key visual marker on a behavior graph. A vertical phase change line on a single subject design graph indicates that a change was made to the experimental condition or intervention being applied. It separates different phases, such as baseline from intervention, or one intervention from another, or intervention from follow-up. It allows for visual comparison of the behavior before and after the change. It doesn't represent missing data. A. A new session unless the intervention changed, B, or a change in observer, D. It marks the point where something you did in the environment changed. Question 30. When teaching a child to follow an instruction example, touch head. The instruction touch head serves as A. Consequence. B. Behavior. C. Reinforcer. D. Discriminative stimulus, SD. Answer: D. Discriminative stimulus, SD. This question asks you to identify the role of the instruction in a teaching interaction within the three-term contingency. The instruction touch head happens before the child's response and signals that performing the correct behavior, touching their heady, will likely lead to reinforcement. It sets the occasion for the behavior. This makes the instruction a discriminative stimulus, SD. The behavior is the child touching their head. The consequence is what follows, like praise. Reinforcers are types of consequences. The instruction is the cue, the SD. Question 31. What is the primary purpose of obtaining informed consent from a client or their legal guardian before starting ABA services? A. To get permission to collect data. B. To ensure the family will comply with the plan. C. To inform them about the services, risks, and benefits, and obtain voluntary agreement. D. To select the most preferred reinforcers. Answer: C. To inform them about the services, risks, and benefits, and obtain voluntary agreement. This question asks about the core purpose of informed consent, a fundamental ethical requirement. Informed consent is a process where you explain the proposed services, including their nature, potential benefits, risks, alternative options, and the right to refuse or withdraw, in language the client or guardian understands. The purpose is to ensure they are fully informed and provide voluntary agreement to receive the services. It's more than just permission to collect data, A, and is required before you start services, not just after preferences. D. Compliance. B. Is not the purpose of consent. Consent is about ensuring the person knows and agrees to what you plan to do. Question 32. You are analyzing ABC data collected for a child's screaming behavior. You notice that screaming occurs most often when demands are placed, and is usually followed by the demand being removed or delayed. This pattern suggests the function of the screaming is A. Attention. B. Tangible. C. Escape. D. Automatic. Answer: C. Escape. This question asks you to interpret ABC data to identify the likely function of a behavior. The pattern in the data is key. The antecedent is demands are placed, something aversive. The consequence is demand being removed or delayed, getting out of the demandee. Since the screaming happens when faced with demands and consistently results in escaping those demands, this pattern strongly suggests the behavior is maintained by escape. Attention is social interaction. Tangible is getting an item. Automatic is self-produced. Antecedent equals demand. Consequence equals escape. Greater than function equals escape. Question 33. When teaching a new skill using a least to most prompting strategy, you start with A. A full physical prompt. B. A gestural prompt. C. No prompt, the natural SD. D. The prompt that is easiest for the therapist to deliver. Answer: C. No prompt, the natural SD. This question asks about the starting point for a least to most prompting strategy. As the name implies, least to most, you begin by providing the least amount of assistance possible, which is usually the natural discriminative stimulus, SD, alone, allowing the learner an opportunity to respond independently. If they don't respond correctly, you then move up the hierarchy of prompts, providing gradually more intrusive assistance, example, verbal, gestural, model, physical, until the learner responds correctly. Most to least starts with the most help. Least to most starts with the least help, no prompt. Question 34. What is the term for a stimulus that has been paired with a variety of primary and other conditioned reinforcers and can be exchanged for many different backup reinforcers, making its value less dependent on any single state of deprivation? A. Primary reinforcer. B. Specific conditioned reinforcer. C. Generalized conditioned reinforcer. D. Unconditioned punisher. Answer: C. Generalized conditioned reinforcer. This question defines a generalized conditioned reinforcer. These are conditioned reinforcers that have been associated with many different types of reinforcers, both primary and other conditioned ones, and can be exchanged for various reinforcing items or activities. Backup reinforcers. Because their value is not tied to a single specific reinforcer, their effectiveness is less impacted by satiation on any one thing. Money and praise are classic examples. A primary reinforcer is unlearned. A specific conditioned reinforcer is tied to a limited set of backups. Unconditioned punishers decrease behavior. Generalized conditioned reinforcers are powerful because they can get you many different things. Question 35. A potential ethical issue arises if a behavior analyst provides services to a client while simultaneously having a close personal relationship with the client's parent, example, best friends. This situation is known as A. Confidentiality breach. B. Conflict of interest/dual relationship. C. Violation of scope of competence. D. Lack of integrity. Answer: B. Conflict of interest/dual relationship. This question describes a dual relationship, which is a common ethical concern. A dual relationship exists when a behavior analyst has both a professional relationship, providing services, and another type of relationship, a close personal friendship, with the same person or family. Ethical guidelines caution against such relationships because they can compromise objectivity, create conflicts of interest, potentially exploit the professional imbalance, or impair the effectiveness of services. Maintaining clear professional boundaries is essential to avoid these issues. Confidentiality, scope of competence, and integrity are related but not the specific term for having these overlapping relationships.